Alrighty, everyone, welcome back to my podcast. My name is Logan, your host with Oars of the Big Sky. Today I'm here with Renee, and I will let her take it off and share a little bit about her story and her business.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I am a spirit guide channeler and a spiritual mentor. I also host a podcast too, the Abundology podcast. So I do readings with people's spirit guides. And I kind of think of like I'm the interpreter. So I get messages from guides and then I pass them on to help people. So people will come if they just want clarity on a situation or they don't know what to do next or honestly, just for fun. I do a lot of birthday readings too, so people know like what's coming this year. So it's just a really super fun job.
Cool, thank you. How did you get into this? Like, how did you originally start in this business and this
Well,
practice?
for about 20 years, I owned a mortgage company in Portland. And gosh, how long has it been now? About 6 years ago, I sold that company. And I just really didn't know like what was next. I was just totally done with doing mortgages. Nobody wants to do that. And I've always had this ability and these skills, and I would use them in my mortgage company, to with my employees and with loans and that sort of thing. And I decided I'm just going to do this now and do readings, readings for people. And I started off really doing more spiritual business mentoring. I do like spiritual life mentoring and business mentoring. So I started off doing more of that because people really knew me from the business world. And now slowly, like 6 years later, it's like transitioned into more just the spirit guide channeling and different classes and that sort of thing.
That's really cool. So, are you originally from Oregon or did you grow up in Montana?
I actually am from California. I
Okay,
know
cool.
people in Montana don't want to hear that. Then I lived in Oregon for about 20 years, and now I've been in Montana for about 3 years.
Perfect. Well, that leads me like right into the next question perfectly. What drew you to Montana?
Okay. My ex-husband, who happened to be my best friend, had passed away, and
Oh,
he
I'm
lived in
sorry.
Ohio at the time, and he had our cars, one of our cars. So I went to
Mhm.
get the car and drive it back to Oregon. And as I was driving, through Montana, I'm going to go a little bit longer story here too.
That's
He
okay.
had he had uploaded his whole entire music library into the car, and there's no good radio stations in Ohio, so I just hit play, and I had this epic, soundtrack for this whole car ride home. When I felt like crying, a sad song would come on. When I felt happy, and thinking of him, a happy song would come on. But it got to the point I was like, holy shit, this soundtrack is completely dialed into this road trip. Like it's meant for me. There's more here. So I got to Montana and I'm like, okay, I need a sign. I need a sign that this is really happening. It's not in my head. I'm not imagining it. I'm not in some grief fog, something like that. So, universe, bring me a sign. So at that moment, this Native American song came on with chanting and flutes and all that other stuff. And right then, and it was called the Crow something. Right then, we passed the sign for the Crow reservation. That same second, where I happened to look down and say it said Crow music, and then we're passing the sign for Crow reservation. So immediately, it's like, oh, this is I just fell in love with Montana. I knew in my heart and my soul this was my place.
Hmm.
So it was a few years later till I actually ended up moving here, but there's something about Montana, and I know what it is now that I've been doing all these readings and stuff, something about Montana that just is so alive and it's wonderful. I don't know why, well, I know why everybody doesn't want to live here with the snow, but if you love the snow, then it's a fabulous place. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that's kind of the whole point of this podcast is like asking people like what about Montana is making your practices better? What is making it like more in tune? So my next question is kind of like, do you do a lot of like readings and practices in nature in Montana?
I don't.
Yeah.
The majority of my clients are really from around the world. They're
Okay,
not from
interesting.
Montana. So I do a few in-person readings, in Montana in my home. And then
Mhm.
I also host spiritual retreats where people will fly in and stay with me for a few days. And in those cases, we do go to Yellowstone and different hot springs and that sort of thing. And I will do readings outside. But for the most part, I don't.
Yeah. Okay,
Hmm.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, um, when you talk about your retreats, could you tell me a little bit more about what you do on those retreats?
I can, but before I talk about that, I want to preface this by saying just as there's energy like in Sedona, if you've ever been there and you've been in the energy vortexes and there's like something alive there,
Yeah.
that's how Montana is too,
Hmm.
especially the closer that you get to the park and that super volcano and all this volcanic energy underneath us. It's alive here and it's really easy to connect to spirit here. So I have people then fly in and I have a list of things that they can choose to do. We can just go hiking, we can go to the park, we can go to that Thousand Buddhas. What is that? Temple of a Thousand Buddhas.
Uh-huh.
We can get massages, we can do cacao ceremony. So they pretty much choose what they want to do. And then I just set it all up and organize everything. And that includes a lot of reading. So, instead of doing a reading for an hour or something like I normally would, I invite their guides in for the whole 3 or 4 days that they're here. So, the
Okay,
whole
cool.
entire time I'm connected. So, we're getting messages constantly while we're just having fun, riding horses or, hiking or something fun like that. So,
That's really cool. That's
mhm.
fun. So, do you get a lot of client base from, is it like around the world in like Europe, in South America? Where are most of your clients from, would you say?
Most of my clients are from the US, but I
Okay.
have clients from just this past week. I
Mhm.
talked to clients from India, Australia, New Zealand,
Wow.
and Switzerland.
Interesting.
So yeah, so it's fun to talk to people. And I have a lot of Canadian clients too. So it's fun to talk to people from like around the world.
Yeah, that makes a lot
Hmm.
of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's fitting because so many people are drawn to Montana, and I'm like trying to get to this like big answer of what makes it so special. I know there's this energy. Do you have any personal experiences with like the energy of Montana other than the road trip that you just like constantly think back to?
Well, I have done readings for because a few of my local clients are also energy workers and channelers and that sort of a thing. So I've
Mhm.
done readings for them, and it's really interesting because a lot of spiritual people right now are being drawn to Montana. Like
Mhm.
this is like the next. I'm going to call it spiritual hub. I think and I
Totally.
think kind of similar to Sedona. And I've been hesitant because I don't want more people coming here because we love it the way that it is. But at the same time, that's what's happening is all of these awakened people are being drawn here to do whatever their work is, whatever is coming next, and our shift to this deeper consciousness. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. It is really cool. It's exciting to see.
It
Do
is.
you, so when you talk about all these people coming to Montana, do you have a community of other spiritual practitioners in Montana that you are close with?
Just people that I've done readings for,
Mm.
and then they've become my friends. So
Yeah.
yeah. But I know that there are quite a few different communities around. I just don't have one right now that resonates with me that much. So
That's fair. Yeah.
mhm.
I'm also in the midst of trying to find one that I totally click with. But
Yeah, yeah.
so you talked about being a spiritual mentor. What does that look like for you?
Often because I'm old now, because I'm just turned 60 this year. um we have lots of life experiences as we go on, and we try they all have some sort of spiritual meaning. And so when you're in them, when you're going through them, like a divorce or you lose your job or something, we're looking at it from the human perspective. But often we can have some sort of clarity and feel a lot better if we pull back and we look at it from like a soul perspective, a soul level. And so that is what I do is I help people put it into perspective. You
Yeah.
know, the reason you are getting a divorce from this person is because they're not part of your journey. You
Mm,
know, you have more
yeah.
important things to do versus, oh, they cheated on me and I'm in trouble. You know, if we can get out of the smaller human stuff and pull back and look at it from a wider perspective, we just feel better and we have more clarity on where our life is going and what our purpose is. So it's really just a lot of reframing.
Yeah. That makes a lot of
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
That's really cool. So, do you ever mentor people in like tarot card readings and astrology and that kind of mentoring as well?
I don't, but what I do is I host other people. So I have a personal astrologer, I have a personal tarot card reader, and actually last month we just had astrology 101 classes,
Oh,
and then starting in November we're having tarot 101 classes. So
mhm.
I host them, but they really are the experts and the teachers.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
Because I was listening to your podcast the other day on like your astrology, and so I was just curious, how do you go about getting that information? Is that from your astrologist?
It's astrologer. You were right the first time. I kind of like astrologist though. That's cute. So a few different things. During readings, there are definitely themes. Like
Mhm.
people tend to be going through similar type things at the same time, which is very fascinating to me. So when I started years ago, I was like, this is interesting. Why is everybody I talked to this week going through this? And so I started doing more research into what the energy was that in that week. You know, what's happening in the stars? Is it a full moon? Is, you know, other planets doing whatever? What's the numerology? What are the other energies that are influencing all of us, the collective? And so I did that research and I figured, well, gosh, I got to do the research anyway. I might as well just put it in a podcast and share it with everybody, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So one, I intuitively get it. You know, and then two, I do then go online, do some Googling, figure out what's going on, and then use that info.
That's cool.
Hmm.
That's cool. And putting together the podcast, was that just something you like were like, oh, I want to share this with other people? Like, let's just hop into it, or did you have any help with that?
No, I didn't have any help. And I knew nothing, zero about podcasting. And so I had a friend that he does film and stuff. He's like, just record it on your phone. So really the first 100 podcasts I recorded on my phone.
Wow.
Until I realized, oh, you know, and I was happy if I had like five people listen, one of them being my mom, you know. So, so since that time, I have a legit microphone and now I put them on YouTube and all the other stuff, but I didn't know anything. And after doing mortgages for so long, I'm like, I might as well just learn something. What's the worst going to happen? Nobody
Yeah.
listens and, you know, I just have fun doing it. But now, once again, a lot of my international clients I get from my podcast.
Oh, really? Interesting. So
Yeah.
they find you on like YouTube
And
and
YouTube,
then go
yeah.
from there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's fun.
Hmm.
This is just like a knowledge question. When you do the horror like astrology readings, is it the same for people in like Australia, in India at the time?
It is.
Okay.
It's very interesting now where it may be winter here and summer there.
Yeah.
It's there's clearly that difference.
Mhm.
But as far as like we have this really big transition happening in November, Pluto's moving into Aquarius. I won't bore everybody with the details, but it's like a really, really big deal. And it will affect all of us on this planet. And we see it now in our election happening in the United States.
Hmm.
And whatever happens here we know, will ripple out across the world to other countries. So this is like a really big turning point in all of
Yeah.
our consciousness. So yeah, so
Yeah.
it does affect everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've never thought about it like that. Hmm.
Hmm.
I like that. Um, so how long have you been into tarot cards, into tarot readings?
Hmm. Gosh, I'm gonna say 20 years or so. So I'm really good at connecting for other people and talking to their spirit guides. But like everybody, maybe we're not so good at listening to our own.
Yeah,
So I do pull cards every morning. And my guides know that. So if I'm not paying attention through the rest of the day, they know every morning at breakfast, I'm going to be sitting down, and that's when they can get my attention and get some messages through to me if there's something that I need to know and I'm just not paying attention.
that's cool. Do you enjoy doing readings for other people?
I do. I love it. I love it. It's so much fun.
That's awesome. Do you have one in particular that like resonates with you to this day?
Oh man, there's so many that resonate with me. I one of them though, I remember one of my very first in-person clients in Portland, and she came to me and she wanted to know if she should go, if she should leave her job
Mhm.
and go surfing, and and take her whole family and go surfing for 3 months. And the guides were really clear, like, yes, you got to leave your job and you've got to go surfing. And so she did. And she came back after those 3 months and like a completely new person, like reborn,
Really?
like, yeah. So it was cool to that she got the permission to go do that.
Mhm.
And then because she followed her intuition and did it, her whole entire life shifted.
Wow,
I
that's really
know.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's moments like those where I like those are the stories I love to tell people, especially when they like don't understand like spiritual practices. And that's kind of why I'm like creating this podcast is to get to this like why what are the benefits of spiritual practices? So what are the benefits do you think they are for you?
Well, I think especially as you get older, one of the biggest things that make a happy life are just inner peace,
Mhm,
and knowing that you're in the right place at the right time. And for me, the spiritual practices really bring me that inner peace
mhm,
where I can tell you the last time I was anxious or angry or, any of those things that our society tries to avoid with drinking and drugging and all the other things.
mhm.
So, doing the readings is just fun. It's my fun
Yeah.
thing. Really, my practice and my work are those 2 hours in the morning that I do my spiritual work so I can stay in this connected energy to be able to do the readings.
Yeah.
So, like
Yeah.
yoga, journaling, the cards, breathing, meditation, all the
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing this is my fourth interview now, and so I've been realizing that a lot of it is meditation in the spiritual
It
world.
is.
Do
Yeah.
you do you do a lot of meditation
I do
alongside
a
like
lot.
the yoga?
Yeah, I do quite a bit of meditation. I meditate before each client. So I do four
Okay.
readings a day. So that's, a half hour before each client. So that's, a couple hours there. But
Mm,
one of the great things about being in Montana is just being in nature, because meditation is really to get you to that connected stage.
mhm.
All you gotta do is walk outside here, and you're connected. So we have a
Yeah.
little bit of a bonus. So I will, when I go hiking or whatever, that's a lot of my meditative time too.
Mhm. That makes sense.
Hmm.
That's cool. Do you have any like techniques when you meditate that you really find effective for you?
It's interesting. Everybody's so different. I don't do guided meditations.
Mm,
They don't work. They're just not for
yeah.
me. But what I started, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago when I started meditating and I go there is I think about looking backwards with my eyeballs. I
Mm,
know that kind of seems like a weird thing, but looking back
yeah.
immediately gets me to the my mind stops thinking, all of that stage.
Mm, I
Hmm.
like that. That's
Yeah.
cool. Interesting. We've already kind of touched on the podcast. Do you find that people listen to your podcast and then reach out like from the international group, but also from the US with more questions? Or do they come to you with more like, I would love to start working with you?
It's mostly I want to start working with you.
Yeah.
Very seldom do I get questions.
Mhm.
I would say that probably around 90% of my business is from referral, where
Okay,
somebody has had
interesting.
a
Yeah.
reading and then they tell somebody else.
Yeah.
And then, occasionally Google search and that sort of thing. But
Mhm.
then the other probably 10% is from the podcast.
Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's cool. Do
Yeah.
you have a physical like storefront in Bozeman?
I don't.
You don't?
I'm
Okay.
in my yoga pants in my family room.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, my computer just keeps lacking on me here. So, are there themes and topics that continually come up in your spiritual readings, in your meditations with clients or yourself that you find are important almost universally? Universally.
Mm, yes. Um, and as I'm thinking now about that, that would probably be like trusting yourself, and
Hmm.
then trusting timing, trusting the universe, trusting whatever power that you believe, whether it's God, the universe, whatever it is that that you believe in that higher power, trusting that, because I think that's where we as humans get really screwed up is, God, I don't know what's going to happen. Like instead of like, oh, this is for everything is always for our highest good. Even in the moment, if it does not seem like it, and you don't know what that highest good is until, it's 10 years later, it's always for our highest good, but we just don't trust it. And then we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our intuition,
Yeah.
and then then you're a mess. If people could just trust their intuition, timing, the universe, themselves, they would just have much calmer, happier, more connected lives.
Hmm. Yeah. That is a big one. I see that one a lot in my friends' readings and all of that. It's always, you have to wait. Things aren't happening right now, but maybe in the future you'll see something that like you didn't before.
Yeah. And we're so impatient, like
Yes.
we want stuff like right now,
Mhm.
and that's not how this works.
No.
Because our energy needs to shift from where we currently are to our new version, so to speak.
Hmm.
And that very seldom like happens in a minute. It
Hmm.
takes time for us to transform and move to that new version.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but
Yeah.
we want it right now. You
No.
know,
Always. Always.
always. Yeah.
Do your clients ever come to you to do emotional healing work when they're looking for readings?
That's not really my thing.
Mhm.
That's not, yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of really great healers out there.
Mhm.
I'm more like clarity.
Yeah.
And as I talk about mentoring too, I don't do coaching. Coaching
Mhm.
is like to get the person to, come to their own realizations. I'll just effing tell you. You know what I mean? I'm just going to tell you this is the way it is. You can agree or not.
Mhm.
But so I think sometimes we just need somebody to like bounce stuff off.
Yeah.
And most of the time, what I tell people is what they already know intuitively. They like already know the answer. They just
Mhm.
need that second confirmation of like, yeah, I knew this already.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You mentioned a little bit earlier, like about believing in God or spiritual practices. Have you run into a lot of controversy when you say you do spiritual practices?
I haven't because,
Good.
being on the West
Yeah.
Coast, we're that's pretty open-minded here
Yeah.
until I kind of moved to Montana.
Mm.
And I've had a few clients now that were really like, this goes against what the church is saying. But it doesn't. It's in,
Yeah.
conjunction to what the church's teachings are. It's all the same information. It's all the same. It's just
Yeah.
the church wraps it up in this little pretty package. Maybe spirituality wraps it up in this little pretty package. Buddhism, this package, but it's all the same info.
Yeah.
So I had never heard that at all until the last 3 years when I moved here. And I was like, oh my goodness, something, that I need to think about a little bit.
Yeah. Were you ever religious in
No,
a like Catholic way? No. Yeah.
no, I didn't grow up with any religion. And I
Yeah.
think that that has allowed me really to be clear with this. I don't have all the filters that sometimes religion puts in place.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
Yeah. A lot of people here, it's obviously not as popular in Montana. And so there's a lot of misinformation of, oh, this
Yes.
is like devil's worship. This is
Yes.
witches, which isn't always a bad thing in my opinion. But
Yeah.
yeah, they're like scared of what it brings to the table.
Yeah. Just because
Can
they
you
don't
talk
know.
a little bit more? Yeah, on like how do you think like the church and like religion in a like church setting? brings the same message as spirituality to people?
Because underlying all of the rules and regulations of religion, and I'm certainly not an expert, the underlying messages are all about loving each other and compassion and caring for each
Yeah.
other. Those are the fundamentals of all of this.
Yeah.
And so if we're going just to that, in spirituality, that's what it is too. Loving yourself, in religion, trusting in God, spirituality, trusting in a higher power, whatever that may be. It still could be God,
Yeah.
or the universe or whatever it may be. So it's all the same stuff.
Mhm.
We just kind of have different wording too.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of your clients like having a hard time with religion and spirituality. Do you see that a lot in Montana, especially with your
That's the
clients?
only time I've ever seen it is in
Oh,
Montana.
really?
Around the
Okay.
world, everybody else is like, whatever. But since I've been here, and it's just interesting to me
Yeah.
at first. But I will say what I do love about people in Montana is how open-minded that they are. Once you explain something, they're like, oh yeah, okay, whatever, live and live. So I do like that.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like they've been exposed to it as
Mhm.
much.
No.
Hmm.
No, it is a very small community here.
Hmm.
So that's why I'm zooming to you. It's very small, and so across this big state.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do your clients, um, have you ever run into a client that like just like does not want to engage in spiritual practices due to religion?
No, because I think that they probably wouldn't be drawn to me
Hmm.
if that was the case.
Yeah.
Energy attracts like energy. So
Yeah.
if they're here, I honor that they're able to speak up and say, how do I reconcile this with my beliefs, my
Yeah.
religious beliefs, and we
Yeah.
can talk it through. But if we're talking about stuff, they're usually ready to be like moving to the next level,
Hmm.
moving
Yeah.
on to whatever is next in their life. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
So, talking about people in Montana not having as much experience about this, like, what advice do you have for someone getting into spiritual practices?
Wow, that's a very good question. What advice? Well, one, we live in a time where everything is on YouTube now. I mean, you can find pretty much any information about anything on YouTube. And I would start with just like the simple basic stuff of connecting to nature. We're in Montana. Let's connect to nature.
Yeah.
That connection just to nature, Mother Nature, the universe, it's all the same stuff.
Hmm.
So if you wanted to just start with the basics of spirituality, spend time in nature with no music, just being quiet on a
Yeah.
hike, fishing, whatever it may be, out in nature. Also, gratitude practice is super simple. Just, I do journaling every morning of, everything that I can think of that morning that I'm grateful for in my life. And it shifts everything, the things that you take for granted or you see as, oh, this is a problem, and you apply gratitude to it. You're like, oh, this isn't a problem. This is great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would just start with those
Okay.
time in nature and gratitude.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense for that. So, talking more about yourself, where do you think you're headed in the future with your spiritual practices? Either in your business, in your personal life, where do you think you're on
Well,
to?
my business is pretty great now. I do a variety of things. My podcast, one-on-one clients. I'm teaching a group of people how, starting tonight, how to channel spirit guides. Like I said, we did the astrology classes, the tarot classes. Um, I have my spiritual retreats. But what something that's been rolling around in my head is, Montana will be one of those spiritual places where people come. And whether we want it to be or not, there people are coming.
Mhm.
And so how can I contribute to that being not slimy? You know what I mean? Being
Yeah.
honest and wholesome and real. And so
Yeah.
I've thought about perhaps, building a website or a portal where people can go and look for the types of practitioners and stuff that they want.
Mhm.
So I've thought about doing that. I don't know. I haven't committed to it yet. It's a little bit of work,
Yeah,
but
that is.
but I just really love my life right now.
Yeah.
I work 4 hours a day and I have time, to love where I live and get outside. And that's pretty much all I want. I'm that's as big as I'd really like it to be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, those are most of my questions. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add as we
No,
wrap up?
I think this is so fun that you're doing this.
Yeah, I've been loving it. It's so much fun to do.
Yeah, yeah.
I plan on continuing it as the year goes through. But
Yeah. It's
yeah.
great. It's really great. So if you would ever like any help in
Yes.
branding Montana as this spiritual place, once
Yeah,
again, I'm torn because, I don't want a bunch of people coming, but they will be coming.
they will be.
How do we do that in a sustainable, authentic, honest, good way?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting. I've been sitting down with a lot of different characters, and it's fun to see different practices, different perspectives, people who grew up in very small places of Montana, people who came out of state, people who had no idea what they were doing and kind of jumped in, or people who have been doing it for 30, 20 years. So it's
Yeah,
been cool. It's been really interesting
very
to see.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
podcasts are fun.
they are so fun.
Well, thank you so much for having me, my dear.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.